Welcome to the economy of the collapse. To put ourselves into the spirit of this talk, which is titled Two Income, Less Freedom, and Fewer Children, what actually happened. We're going to look at a little reel talking about some ideas that are scientifically false. And then that's going to bring us to why we have chosen to be replaced through mass migration and to become extinct. So let's have a quick look at this reel, and then we're going to circle back with the monologue.
Lies of feminism debunked in 15 minutes. Wage gap. The wage gap has been debunked countless times. It compares all women with all men and doesn't account for differences in experience, work hours, holidays, education or work history, personality, or anything else. If you analyze the variance, wage gap due to sexism is less than negligible. Women fought for years for the right to vote, debunked in this video. Women opposed the vote and men were more progressive than women. Women made anti-suffrage posters, and in many cases even as little as 3% of women supported women's suffrage. Women fought for their right to work. Yes, but this was because they lost their husbands in world wars and needed income. States fueled this propaganda as well, calling women to work. It was a necessity. Before the 60s, being a housewife was a dream. Women shouldn't let husbands lead because men are abusive. When taking into account physical, psychological, and sexual abuse combined, women represent 55% of abuse victims, true. But only, let's say, 15% of men report domestic abuse to police. Half of them don't even tell anyone. On the other hand, 28% of women report abuse on the low end. Taking these numbers into account in the most biased towards women data possible, men would still be 60% of abuse victims. Women are more abusive. Women do the lion's share of work at home. According to Pew Research, men are contributing more to the household than women. When you add up home tasks and work, men contribute 2 hours more and are actually owed labor. There has never been a time in history when men have contributed more and women contributed less than today. Women working brings a second income. Wrong. Each 10% increase in women's workforce participation results in an 8 to 14% wage drop in the long term, thus reducing total income when all women work. Women aren't baby machines. You are literally biologically made to do that. Birth rates affect everything. More workers means earlier retirement, lower taxes, higher pension, lower prices, and only women can regulate this. Men simply can't take this role. Male leadership is bad. Female-led companies perform significantly worse than men's. This goes for startups and big companies alike. Men's leadership is less emotionally impulsive, less panicky, more long-term oriented, and more financially responsible than women's is, generally speaking. Women are also worse with money, being able to save less. 52 Lies of Feminism debunked in 15 minutes. Wage gap. The wage gap has been debunked countless times.
That brings us to one of the biggest lies also, that's that we'll become richer. In the 1950s, one income was enough. A house was affordable and families had multiple children. Today, both parents work, housing is hard to afford, and most families have 1 or 2 children, sometimes none. So the question is simple. Are we actually richer? Or did we just change the rule of the game? So we were sold a very clear idea. More work, more independence, more opportunity equal a better life. On paper, it makes sense if you think about it. But in reality, it's way more complicated. In the 1950s and 60s, one income was often enough to support a household. Housing took a smaller share of income, family life was structured around presence at home. The economy was built around that model. Starting in the 70s, massive entry of women into the workforce. This led to higher household income, greater economic participation, major social transformation. On paper, we were seeing progress for a very short period of time. But here's the key insight. When two income become the norm, the system quickly adjusts, price rise, housing adapt, expectation increase. I mean, it's basic economy 101, your first class, right? At the first year. So what was once an advantage become a requirement real quick. The clearest example is housing. Home price have grown much faster than incomes. Price to income ratio have exploded, ownership is increasingly difficult. So today, two income are often needed just to enter the market. And it's not just housing, it's transportation, fuel, insurance, services, education, everything's rising. Income goes up, but real purchasing power is going down. The biggest shift is time. With two working parents, less availability, more stress, more dependence on the system because the government needs to kind of come in, either with daycare services, subsidizing that, and all of these other things. So financial income increases in the short term, but real freedom often doesn't. And this is where it becomes critical. Children in a two-income system, so you need childcare, you need scheduling, logistic, cost. Each additional child becomes more complex, becomes a financial burden. In contrast, when one parent is already at home, organization is simpler to add another kid. Marginal cost of another child is very, very low. It's still demanding, but structurally more compatible with larger families. Removing that, it's the result. In today's natality rate, Canada has 1.3 children per woman. Replacement level is at 2.1. That historic decline is not just dramatic, it's leading to extinction. Take Quebec, because it's a very clear case because of the language. So Quebec has tried to subsidize childcare. It has actually increased workforce participation while creating short-term fertility effect at the margin. It was not enough to actually move the needle over the replacement rate. But structurally, it actually reinforced a two-income model, and it doesn't strongly support larger family. So what you have is the disparition, the extinction of the Francophone in North America in 100 years if we keep going that route. There's another important dimension, it's relationship stability since the 1970s. Higher divorce rate, more separation. Of course, Kevin O'Leary would say it's the biggest financial destruction of wealth, the separation. And of course, it leads to division of asset, two households instead of one. So they were barely able to afford one. So often when they separate, they have to go to rental apartment, and there's a drop in quality of life for the kids. Legal costs, that is just waste of wealth, loss of the share deficiency, and one economic unit become two weaker ones actually. And of course, there's all of the less visible thing and cost on the children, instability, transition, emotional strain, attachment issue, daddy issue that leads to an overrepresentation in prison, and all of that, which is extremely costly. And again, the state share that burden, and then it leads to increased taxation and all of that. So when you put all of that together, you get the result where you work more to generate more income. But that income, in terms of purchasing power, doesn't do anything. And you have less time, fewer children, and you have more instability in your own life and your children's life. And on top of that, when a society doesn't reproduce, it must compensate through mass migration. And in the case of Quebec, it leads to the disappearance of the French languages. So even if we are not debating immigration in terms of a change in demographic, either as a visible minority or as cultural in the kind of large, broader sense, or in terms of religion. So even if you don't want to talk about that, or you don't want to think about that, just in terms of the languages, for example, in Quebec, it's French, They've tried to protect French languages for a very long time. So it will disappear just because of this phenomenon. So we arrive at this paradox where we have a more productive economy, but one that is less aligned with family formation and leads to extinction. So the real question is do we earn more? It's do we actually live better, and are we going to survive? We may have increased income, but not necessarily real freedom. And we've built a system that produces more wealth, but fewer children. And then we import a population because we are no longer reproducing ourselves.